Can you hear me all right back there? Oh, I want to welcome you once again to the open classroom. How many of you were here last week when we had Graham Allison and Juliet Cayenne? Well, you're in for another phenomenal evening. As you know, this has been quite the semester with the guests we've had, beginning with Larry Summers and Greg Mankiw. We've been stealing a lot of our talent from Harvard this year, but we also have our friend Steve Kinzer from BU, and you'll be seeing more people. Coming up next week, we're going to be looking at, we're going to change gears again and start looking at healthcare issues. And we have a wonderful lineup of people, and we hope you'll be with us. How many of you have attended at least 3 of these open classrooms this semester? Oh, fantastic. How many of you have attended other open classrooms, any of the other 9 we've now had, since this is the 10th anniversary semester? Fantastic. We're glad to have you all here. Without further ado, my colleague and very good friend, Governor Dukakis.
Thanks, Barry. One of the wonderful things, among a lot of things, about politics is that it gives one an opportunity to reach out to young people in particular and get them actively involved in your campaigns, and from there you hope that that will strike a spark and they'll go on to do other great things in public service. And it's a particular pleasure for me tonight to introduce 2 of my kids. It started with me at a very early age. Nick Burns was ringing doorbells for me in Wellesley in 1974. He was a high school junior, senior? Senior. And look what happened to him. Steve was a Brookline boy who had this interesting idea that he would, that the traditional Brookline high school newspaper was really kind of a piece of nothing. I mean, kind of traditional and wasn't doing serious journalism. And he thought it was time for an alternative Brookline high school newspaper, which he wanted to call The Wrap. And so we got a knock on our door, Kitty and I was in the legislature at that time. This kid Kinzer introduces himself and says, I'm trying to put this together and I need some money. And I think the total cost of publishing the thing was $160. Did I give you 25?
What I remember,
maybe it was 20.
A lot of money back then, Mike.
Look, I was living on a legislative salary of $5,200 and making another $5,000 practicing law. So, as always, modest expenditures. Kenny says I'm the cheapest guy in America. I think that's a little extreme. Any Greek speakers in the room? Nobody? Nick, I'm not sure you learned this when you were ambassador. You probably did. The first Greek word Kitty ever learned was the word syngunis, which, not to put too fine a point on it, probably miser is the closest. I think she was a little excessive describing my spending habits, but it is true that our kids spent into a Costco intervention on me last year. So you get some point of wearing, some sense of wearing my shopping. But really, to be able to, first to see these guys and what they did, and what they've done in their careers, and to be able to ask them to come here to speak to us on a particularly important part of the world and international politics is very special. Nick went to D.C., went on to become a member of the Foreign Service, and was the ambassador to Greece and other things, but went on to distinguish himself in a whole series of positions, and ended up as Undersecretary for Political Affairs, which is just below the Secretary of State. And is now a professor of practice over at the Kennedy School, but more than that, as I hope many of you know, he writes a column on a regular basis for the Boston Globe on foreign policy and international affairs, and I commend it to you. He's been a particular voice of reason on the subject of Iran. And I think the Burns point of view is increasingly emerging as the appropriate point of view, notwithstanding a few folks in the Eastern Mediterranean who want to do other things. And maybe, well, I shouldn't say this, it's not entirely clear what the Republican nominee for presidency wants to do, but anyway, read his column. Read his column because it's wise and thoughtful, the result of great experience, and we're just very grateful to you for joining us tonight. In Stephen's case, his journey was a little more complicated. After he left, graduated from Brookline High School, and I know, by the way, I not only gave him a few bucks, but I contacted the superintendent of schools, who was a good friend of ours, but wanted to ban the distribution of the wrapper on the Brookline High School campus, and I had to give my friend Bob Sperber a brief seminar in the First Amendment, so that Steve could distribute the newspaper. Had been at NYU, came back, volunteered for nothing to work for me in the State House when I was a legislator, at a time when we had literally no staff, none. Then went to Boston University, graduated magna, came back, was very much part of my 1970 campaign for the lieutenant governorship, 74 campaign. In fact, in 1969, in order to get the Dukakis name around, I mean, I was just a state rep from Brooklyn, we decided to print up bumper stickers which simply said Dukakis 7, and put them on cars and have people drive around. And Steve was in the western part of the state. He drove in those days they pumped the gas for you. He drove into a gasoline station. The guy came out and he said, Dukakis? What's a Dukakis? Steve said, it's a rare bird, there are only 70 of them left. Anyway, worked for me in the governor's office, and then decided he wanted to go into journalism in a serious way. He happens to be completely fluent in Spanish. Became the Latin American correspondent for the New York Times, after the Boston Globe, and subsequently the New York Times correspondent in Managua, all during the Sandinista-Contra business. He's lucky to be alive. If he wants to tell that story, he can, but a Cuban Airlines airline, which was supposed to take it from Jamaica to Havana on his regular annual trip to Havana to report on what was going on in Cuba, the Castro, was blown up by an interesting character who we assumed had ties to the CIA, among other things. Killed 74 people. Fortunately, Stephen had finished his assignment to make it a little early, managed to grab a Wednesday plane, otherwise he would be late. That guy, by the way, is still walking around Miami, a free man with impunity, wearing Che Guevara's watch on his wrist. Anyway, fortunately, Steve was with us from Managua, where he was the correspondent of record building. He turned to the United States newspapers, then went to Germany, married his German teacher, who's not with us tonight, but is lovely, and a good friend. From there to Istanbul, and got deeply interested and involved in the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean. And in fact, we had one wonderful occasion. Kitty and I were visiting my dad's hometown in Western Turkey, which back prior to the forced exchange in 1923 had about 1.5 million Greeks. And Steve met us on the dock from which my father had sailed to the United States at the age of 15. And had a wonderful time. He's done some great writing. If you're interested in why, among other things, we're having problems in Iran these days, you want to certainly read All the Shah's Men, which is a story about the United States and the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran and restored the Shah. Anyway, we're just very fortunate to have these two guys, and I'm very proud to be able to introduce them. So we're going to start with Nick, and then we're going to go to Steve, and we'll take a little break, and we're going to have a good line of discussion. Nicholas Burns.